Jason and Brian were two. This incident took place in Georgia's Warren County, which is located far inland. Marissa, my girlfriend, and I were driving around the neighborhood to see if it was somewhere we would like to reside. We wanted something spacious and calm, and that's what it was. She enjoys going to church a little more than I do, although we are both Roman Catholics. In the middle of the day on a weekday, there was very little traffic. Before choosing a location, we looked at a number of landmarks and other notable localities. Marissa has spent her entire childhood riding horses, so having a barn for them was a major reason for us to move to a rural area. We happened to pass by a small, adorable chapel on the side of this extremely quiet road, with a number of automobiles in the parking lot after looking at some properties that were for sale. Marissa shook my shoulder and suggested that because this church wasn't too far from the previous property we had looked at, we should check to see if there was a mess there and if it was pleasant. I then parked my car next to an ancient red minivan in the building's tiny, dirt-like parking lot. In fact, I would say that the majority of the cars in the parking lot were older. As we were getting out of the car, I brought that up to Marissa. She concurred and stated that it was probably because it was a lower income region. We entered the church once I had unlocked the entrance for us, and as we had anticipated, the interior was somewhat small. There were, I would estimate, 5 rows of pews, with the nave, or center aisle, dividing each row in half. They weren't an elderly group, but there had to be at least 20 individuals in there. Every mass, no matter how big or small, usually included a fair number of seniors, but by the looks of the backs of heads, everyone there looked to be in their 30s or 40s. Everyone appeared to be sitting in silence for a prayer of some sort. The ones nearest to us began staring at us as soon as we sat down in the back, almost one at a time. When other people noticed, they would first glance at what the others were staring at before turning to look at us. After exchanging glances, Marissa and I looked uneasily back at everyone. We were limited to thinking only smiles. Nobody gave a smile in return. They were staring at us with the most indifferent looks. It dawned on me that not a single one of these folks was dressed appropriately for a mass. What was happening in this situation? I became aware that there were no ladies in the room at this point. All of them, except for Marissa. They seemed to be staring at Marissa more than at me in the stairs. At this purported church, a man in a mask stood in front of what I assume was the altar. He then stepped up, pointed at us, and stated, "I decided to respond on our behalf," and stated that we were simply traveling through and that we wanted to attend the Mass. It was obvious that the man was not a priest and that the place was not a Roman Catholic church. "You must go right away," the man in the mask replied. Every last person in the church was staring at us by this point. We got up, went outside, and dashed to the car as I shouted, "Come on, honey!" I quickly took us out of the parking lot so we didn't waste any time sitting in the car. In the parking lot, we both saw someone from the building getting into their van through our rear-view mirrors. Until we noticed the gray van gaining up to us in the rear-view mirror, I thought there was no chance they would pursue us. We drove directly to the Warren County Sheriff's Office, thanks to Marissa's GPS. Not on our ass, but close enough that it was always evident that the van was following us. The van continued traveling down the road as soon as we parked into the public safety parking lot. Once it vanished, we simply drove straight home and never looked at Warren County again. We clearly ended up in some kind of cult meeting, but I don't get why they had someone follow us, nor why they were having their meeting in broad daylight, or why they didn't at least lock the door. 8 years ago, to be exact, is when 2 of my buddies, James and Sean, and I did something extremely foolish. However, at the time, we passed the time by acting foolishly. Although Sean and I no longer have a close friendship with James, we do communicate frequently, and we frequently discuss this tale. We were both 19. We called bumfuck New Jersey home. Our old town has a lot of abandoned residences, and not far from our houses, on top of a hilly road, stood an abandoned church. The church had been abandoned for many years, was located on a closed-off road, and was well known to the locals. Since I now live in Florida, I'm not sure if it's still standing or what its current status is, but James, Sean, and I, being the troublemaking thrill seekers that we were, came up with this brilliant scheme one late night to bring a Ouija board to the church. Since it was October, I suppose we were celebrating Halloween with this. Sean brought the Ouija board that he has in his closet. I picked up Sean and James first, since I was the one driving the three of us, and we just headed right into the church. We had to park on the side of the road and walk from there, because the road leading up the hill to the church was completely cut off. To avoid drawing too much attention, we first just used one flashlight as we followed the route up the hill to the church. But as soon as we reached the top of the hill, all three of us switched on our flashlights. The church had a gravel parking lot next to it and was encircled by woods in almost every direction. The massive front entrance was already ajar since the church had been broken into 1,000,000 times previously and was covered with graffiti. It scraped on the floor though, so it took two of us to pull it open. Naturally, as soon as we were inside, we just used our flashlights to scan the area to make sure nobody else was present. It was undoubtedly unsettling to be there at night. After setting up the Ouija board, Sean smiled and said it would enhance the experience before removing these 3 candles from his rucksack. We switched off our flashlights when he arranged the 3 candles in a triangle shape around the board. Now that the candles were the only source of light in the entire space, the atmosphere was considerably more unsettling and ominous. It was extremely limited to our field of vision, maybe 6 feet in all directions. We then started using the Ouija board for play. For the most part, Sean was speaking. I can't recall precisely what he said at this point, but he most definitely began with, "We all burst out laughing as the planchette began to move." I was certain that it was one of them. It seems impossible to play Ouija with friends if someone isn't making jokes about moving the planchette. However, we agreed to it, and the person who was moving it spelled out a few things. However, as all of this was going on, we noticed an odd crackling sound coming from the church altar. It sounded, as best I could describe it, like a large piece of wood splitting in half. It sounded like it was done by someone and very loud. Each of us leaped in response. We quickly shone the spotlights on our phones toward the altar. As far as we could tell, no one was present. After that, I believe they were both as freaked out as I was. However, the location was dilapidated, so occasional strange sounds didn't seem all that strange, so we continued on. It was our turn to ask questions of the board, but the planchette had stopped moving. I believe this is the case since the crack sound alarmed the 3 of us, and we started to take it more seriously. This continued for a while, before another noise from the altar area once more broke the stillness. We all jumped and screamed when something fell on the Ouija board before we even had a chance to beam our lights over there again. The rock resembled a golf ball in size. 2 seconds ago, all 3 of us had our hands on the planchette, and none of us could have done that. Leaving the Ouija board and candles behind, the 3 of us stood up and raced back out of the chapel while screaming. We didn't hang around since we thought we were being followed. So we ran all the way down the hill and back to my car. We all went back to James's house in my car. For about 30 minutes we conversed while sitting in the car, pondering over the events that had occurred. Sean is also highly superstitious and religious. He was sure we had connected with a spirit of some sort. Really, I don't think any of that stuff exists. It scares me just as much to think that there was another person in the church with us. To make matters even worse, Sean returned to the chapel the following day with James in order to retrieve his Ouija board. The candles were still lit, but the Ouija board was gone. They made the quick decision to leave when they noticed it was missing from the entrance. To this day, this is the scariest thing I have ever experienced.